Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our next grammar video. This one we're taking a little change of pace. We're going to look at the ACT, some tips and tricks to help you do well on that test instead of our typical revision strategies. Fun fact, before I was a teacher, I was an actor, and one of the odd jobs I worked in addition to waiting tables is I taught the ACT. So I have a wealth of knowledge that I'm hoping to share with you to help you out. I'm going to move through all this information pretty quickly. Feel free to pause or go back anytime you need to, but you know that. So first, we have the ACT, the test. This is a lovely little chart. We're just going to focus in this on the English reading and writing. So I'm sure your math and your science teachers have some information. I also do have some information and some exercises on those as well. If you want to ask your teacher for some through me to try to track me down, I'll gladly get those to you. So that's the overview. Some general test-taking strategies. Take your time. It is a time test, and you can't go back and redo anything once each section is over. So why am I saying take your time? Well, because you don't want to make silly or careless errors. Those will kill you. You don't want to accidentally flip a negative and a positive. So you got to be cautious with those. Take your time. Don't rush. Also focus, and it's okay to take quick little mental breaks if you notice you're drifting off a little bit. You got to more or less stay in your seat, but give yourself a kind of stretch up or shake your limbs out a little bit or find a way to kind of get that blood flowing and get your mind back on the task at hand. And lastly, you want to make sure you answer every question. If you notice you're running out of time at the end, make sure you get all those bubbles filled in because you can't go back. There's no penalty for getting something wrong. Guessing is only going to add to your score. Looking at the English test specifically. Let's look at the timing of it. You have 5 passages in 45 minutes on the English test, which is the grammar test. That means you have 9 minutes a passage. And what I would recommend, about 8 minutes and 30 seconds, finish up the passage you're on and move on to the next one. How are you going to know that? Well, there'll be a clock in the room, and say you start at 9 o'clock. I would on a sheet of paper, or on the test itself, because you can write on it. You write 9:09, and you write 9:18, and you write 9:27, and you write 9:36. Right? Did I do those right? I think so. And so you know, and then yeah, the 9:45. So you know the stopping point for each test, and you know when you have to move on, because you do want to make sure to get to all of the passages. So how do you prepare for the grammar test? Well, you can go back and rewatch those sentence pattern videos from first semester. They will help you kind of refresh on some grammar issues we've talked about. You can go to ACT.org and question of the day. There's also a ton of ACT practice stuff online. There's a ton of ACT practice stuff that I have that you can get through your teacher if you want. Also, we have given you a little handout, Grammar at a Glance and English in a Nutshell. Has all the information you need for the ACT. And if there's, read through that. And if you have questions, ask your teacher, hey, this idea is confusing to me. Can you help me out? Absolutely, we will. So, specific test strategies for the English test. 3 steps. You want to read to get the full context. You don't want to just read until you get to the underlined point. You want to read the full sentence that contains the underlined section, or maybe even the full paragraph, depending, and we'll see an example of that in a moment. You want to eliminate answers that don't fix the problem that you find, and then you want to plug the new answer back in and check it, and make sure you didn't create any new problems. And we'll look at an example of that. Answers in ACT English should be concise, clear, and grammatically correct. ACT style is that, generally speaking, not all the time, but generally speaking, shorter is better. So if you have an option between a longer answer and a shorter answer, generally go with the shorter one, unless the longer one has new necessary information, or unless the shorter one has a grammatical problem. Just a rule of thumb. It's not going to be true every time, but something to maybe store in the back of your mind. Okay, let's do this a little practice. Here's a sentence. She lined up the nose of the open cockpit biplane on the runway's center mark. She gave the engine full throttle and took off into history. We've read the full context. That was step 1. Step 2, we're going to eliminate things that don't make any sense. Well, first of all, what do we see as the issue here? We see that because there's a she, because there's a subject, we can't just separate that with a comma. So we know that no change is wrong. We see that just substituting Coleman for she is the same problem. So we are now between B and D. Looking at the full context, we see that this sentence is a list. She lined up the nose, gave the engine full throttle, and took off into history. When we have a list, we know that the answer is B. That's how that process goes. Make sure you're reading that full context and then plug it back in. If we plug it back in there, just the comma, she lined up the nose of the open cockpit biplane on the runway center mark, gave the engine full throttle, and took off into history. No new errors. Everything's hunky-dory. Moving on to the reading test. So there are 4 passages. You have prose fiction, humanities, natural science, and social science. Each passage has 10 questions, and you have 35 minutes, meaning you have 8 minutes and 45 seconds per passage. Same deal as with the English test. I take a moment right at the beginning and jot down every 8:45 so you know when you have to be moving on. And at approximately 8 minutes 15, finish up the last couple of questions that you have and move on because you want to make sure you get to every passage. It's possible that questions 38, 39, and 40 are going to be super easy for you, and you want to make sure you get to read them and give them a chance to be answered correctly, and you're not just guessing. So, how do you prepare for the reading test? Well, number 1, ignore your prior knowledge. And what I mean by this is the ACT is set up that all of the answers are within the readings that they give you. Some of them will be right there on the surface, easy to grab. Some of them you're going to need to infer based on the information there, but you don't need to know anything else. So make sure the answers that you choose are rooted in that passage. Practice reading with focus and speed. Have you ever read something and you're reading it for homework or just a magazine for pleasure, and you're reading for 5 minutes or so, and you go back and you turn a couple of pages and you go, wait a minute, I have no idea, I don't remember what I just read. Happens all the time, and you want to try to prevent that. And one of the strategies for reading will help you focus, and we'll go over that in a minute. But practice reading with focus and speed. Go to ESPN.com or go to the teenmagazine.com, 17magazine.com, and just read these articles and practice and time yourself. Read the newspaper, read CNN.com. Go to all these places and just practice reading with focus. Time yourself. See how fast you can do and still remember what you wrote. That practice will help you. And lastly, breathe. We've been learning these skills, these reading comprehension skills, the entire year. You know how to do them. Have confidence in yourself. So, let's look at the reading strategy specifically. Read and take notes. That take notes thing, to me, is really important because that's what gives you that focus. You have a task now, and that's to take notes, so you're going to remember what it is. And then also, those notes give you the opportunity to have like a little reverse outline. What should the notes be? Well, they should be brief, not long at all. And I think they should just be a quick little summary of each paragraph or each kind of chunk. That gives you a task. It gives you then an outline that you can go back, and question 12 asks about what the author thinks about mongoose. So you go, well, where was the author talking about mongoose? This paragraph, I found it. You can go back and reread what you need to. So read and take notes, and then look at the question and find clues. Well, what sort of clues? According to the author, or in line 23, those are clues that will help you find the answer. So look at the question stem. Don't look at the responses, just the question, and try to find some clues. And then still, even before looking at responses, I would recommend trying to predict the answer. And the reason you want to do that is sometimes ACT will have an answer that is right, and the passage says it, but it isn't answering the question that they asked, and therefore isn't the best answer. And if you predict, you eliminate making that mistake because you are answering the question that is being asked. So let's take a moment to practice this strategy. Read, take notes, look at the question, and then predict. Here we go. On your note sheet, I've provided a little excerpted passage, and I want you to read that and jot down a note or two in the margin, quick little summary of what's going on. And one other thing to think about, on the ACT, they're going to have little introductions to the passages. Read them, because they're going to often provide you with some background information and give you a little leg up. So this passage is adapted from an excerpt from Bleak House by Charles Dickens. In this passage, Esther recounts some of her childhood experiences, so it's an older woman looking back on her past. Give that a read. Feel free to pause the video and come back when you're done. Now that you've finished reading and jotting down a couple of notes, we want to read, look for clues, and predict the answer. So the prediction, you don't have to write the predictions down on the ACT, but even in your mind, just predict and be as specific and detailed as you can. So predict the answer to this. It is most likely that Esther thinks of her doll as. How does she view that doll? Be specific, be detailed, write that prediction down. Pause it if you need a moment to think about it. And then when you're done, we're going to look at matching your prediction with the best answer choice. You have a good detailed prediction. Which one of these, A, B, C, D, best matches? And go ahead and write that down. I don't know if there's a spot in the note sheet, but go ahead and write that down, which answer you think it is. And now let's go through the answers. Well, we know it's not only an amusing plaything. We wouldn't have predicted anything like that. We know it's not a toy too fragile to touch. The best prediction, or the best answer here, is A, her only friend and confidant. C's not a bad choice either, and there's actually information later in the passage that I've cut out that lends it more credence to A. So if you got A and you made a good prediction, pat yourself on the back. Nice job. So that process will help you on the reading test, and it'll help you move through it, hopefully at a quick pace. Lastly, we want to look at the writing test. So now there's three things that I think you should do when you're doing the writing, and here I have a time breakdown for each of them. So I think you should take 5 minutes to plan and organize your response. You're going to want to know the prompt and understand the prompt. You're going to want to come up with a thesis. You want to have evidence and counter evidence. And then I think writing a short, brief outline so you have your ideas there and a little plan ahead of time is going to be good. Then that leaves you about 22 minutes to write your essay, to actually compose it. And then what do I think is super, super important? Of course, you leave yourself some time to proofread and fix any errors that you see and use those revision strategies. The ACT graders know that it's a time situation, that it's one draft. So if you need to draw some arrows and add information, or if you need to cross stuff off, they know to ignore that and to accept that. What they are looking for is your content, is your argument. So make sure you have a good, clear argument. So let's do a little writing test practice here. On your note sheet, you have a prompt for the ACT writing, and I want you to do just that step one. Read and fully understand the prompt. Draft a thesis that is clear and unambiguous, and then a quick little classic argument outline. Some sort of introduction, a good, clear, solid thesis, a counter argument, your lines of argument, background, conclusion. Doesn't matter the order as long as all that information is in there. And then go ahead and write that little outline on the note sheet. When you're done with that, come on back to the video, and I'm going to show you some final little tips and tricks. A couple things to think about. Number one, and we talked about this, fill in every bubble. You want to make sure that everything gets answered. The second thing you want to look at is making sure. Oh, excuse me. Hold on a sec. I have a phone call here. Hello? Yeah. Oh, you want me to remind the kids to not bring their cell phones to the ACT? Yeah, sure. I can let them know that. Let them know that even if they're in their backpacks, they could get kicked out of the test? Okay, sure, I can let them know that. Oh, and let them know that even if it's like during breaks, they can't have it. They can't have it at all, so like leave it in their car? Yeah, sure, I'll let them know that. Okay, bye. All right, sorry about that, guys. Nothing important. So, something else, little tip and trick. Have a little bit of chocolate, like a Hershey's Kiss. Chocolate, studies have shown, boosts brain power over the short term. So if you have a little bit of chocolate or mint, that'll kind of help get you kick-started. Something else to think about it, eat breakfast. That'll give you some energy, some